Hello, so we are back for part two of my prolotherapy adventure. Part one was just really covering the experience at a high level, but this is where we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So, like what imaging I got, what were the results, what the actual procedure was, how much should it cost, and the results so far. It's only early days, so we'll cover that at a high level, but let's dive into the detail. So, starting with just some of the symptoms I was having. Now, I know our bodies are complex, so don't know if these are from the neck instability or whether these are from other things. But what led me to really deep dive into a neck investigation was I was having lots of neck and shoulder pain, lots of occipital pain, so like between the skull and the neck, so painful, and it would tend to grow. So like in the morning it wouldn't be too bad, and by night I couldn't watch TV, couldn't keep my head up, really bad. And I was having some headaches, lots of ear pressure and ear popping, lots of tinnitus. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. Tinnitus, I think it is. And it was to the point where I would like turn my head and then I wouldn't be able to hear out of one ear and I just get this massive loud ringing. It's kind of like you've been punched in the head. So it was starting to build. So we knew we had to kind of look a bit further into it. Actually, it starts about a year ago when I started having the paralysis and non-epileptic seizure episodes. I got some imaging done, and a neurosurgeon in Sydney did say I had abnormal craniocervical measurements. So there was some mild instability identified then, but only one jugular compression at that time. I think it was like 50% that turned into 90% if I turned my head, which we all know isn't enough to intervene because you've got the other ones. So they were like, that's probably not causing your issues. Fast forward to a year later, that's when all of those symptoms I was talking about started getting worse. I went back to a legend in Melbourne, a brain, neck, and spine specialist who really gets this stuff, and he sent me off for some imaging. Now, I was told to go somewhere local, but I have had terrible experience in Melbourne with scans, radiologist quality, rate the time they take to look through the scans, and I know that they're not compensated / incentivized to really look into these scans in details, nor is potentially the education for some of this stuff there. So I flew to my friends in Mermaid Beach in Queensland, MBR, best radiologist in Australia, because I really knew I wanted to get the most accurate imaging because this was such a problem. So it was worth flying up there. And the 3 scans I got, one, it was, I'm having to read this because I'm not going to remember all of this. One was a dynamic MRI of the neck vessels. So one in head neutral, one looking right and one looking left. So I've never had a dynamic MRI before. So that was pretty cool. And then I had to do X-ray flexion extension. And I remember the radiologist or the person doing the X-ray saying, wow, like you've got some range of motion there. So shock horror. And then a CT, a dynamic CT. So that was supine, so neutral, and then looking left and looking right again. So I love MBR because they always nail the dynamic scans, and dynamic scans are such a huge part of my life. So really happy I flew up there for that. The dynamic MRI neck vessels, so head in neutral and then looking left and right. The results overall were numerous venous vascular compressions. So in neutral position with my head straight, uh, it says upper neck, so near the styloid bone or stylojugular recess. The right side was 34% compressed and the left side was 43% compressed. Those are my 2 jugulars, sorry. So both jugular veins partially narrowed in the upper neck. And then in the lower neck, above the thoracic outlet near the collarbone, that's also where the jugular vein passes between the, I can never say this right, sternocleidomastoid muscle, or your SCM, and your anterior scalene muscles. So there at that level on both sides, 100% squished, absolutely closed up. So those 2 muscles, 100% on both sides are squishing my jugular vein. Pretty interesting stuff, because if you think back to what I said before, a year ago, I only had 1 jugular compression, which was only at 50%, and now I've got 4. So again, crazy stuff. Really glad I went up to MBR to find those results. Now, what was interesting is that head position does change things, shock horror. So some compressions of mine improved when I tilted my head, some worsened when I tilted my head. But the lower compression was persistent. So no matter what I did, the lower one was a really big persistent issue. So that was the result of the first scan. Now moving on to the X-ray flexion and extension. In neutral, I had, again, can't pronounce these big words, anteriolethesis. I'm going to put all of the writing up here so you know what I'm saying. But it was at levels C2 to 4. That basically just means that my vertebrae slipped or shift slightly forward relative to the one below it. So think of it like the vertebrae all stack perfectly straight, or they should be. Mine are a little bit forward over the top of each other. And then when I bend my head forward, this causes more movement and more instability. So from C4, C5, C6 get worse when I look down. And then looking back's not too bad. It would stay at the same level of instability. So that was a bit surprising. I tend to get symptoms, looking right and up and stuff like that. So no, apparently looking down, it more slip forward. So basically, for the rest of the CT report, just agreed with what the X-ray said, and it just measured in more detail the enterolethesis. I can never say it. Between the C2, C3, C3, C4, C4, C5, starting at 3 millimeters. So just that slippage. So those were the results of the 3 scans and the 3 reports from the radiologist. But then my specialist wrote to my GP, and his findings, once looking through all the scans, were that all of those scans showed significant multi-level instability in my neck. And he also says that I have greater than 80% uncovering of the C2 facet and range of motion. So particularly rotation to the right. So that's what a subluxation is. So it's a partial dislocation. So between my C1 and C2, when I turn my head, it means that 80% of the facet is uncovered. So only 20% is kind of like lined up, if that makes sense. And I also just wanted to quickly jump back in and say about the scans that the gold standard is actually upright. So Australia doesn't have any good upright MRIs. So there's one in Sydney, a new one, and one in Melbourne. But to give you an idea, I'm pretty sure the one in Sydney is like 0.6 T. And the standard in Australia is like 3T. I've had some 1.5 T scans, and specialists have told me that it's terrible quality. So you can imagine the 0.6 isn't great. So Australia doesn't have an option to do an upright MRI. I know other countries do, but to give everyone an understanding or idea of why that's important is because all of my scans were laying down supine, except for the X-ray, but the MRI and the CT that gave the most detail were lying down. And I had severe neck instability laying down. Imagine standing up. So when you're standing up, this thing weighs like apparently the weight of like a bowling ball. It's like so heavy, your brain and your head. So imagine all that weight force when I'm upright on the neck instability. Like, can't be good. That's why they love doing upright scans in other countries. Gives them a real idea of the stress and the instability, because you spend most of your day sitting or standing, right? So all of these scans and results were laying down. So just to give you an idea, just imagine, I couldn't imagine what my results would be upright. It would be fascinating. So as I mentioned earlier, that he wrote to my GP and so detailed all these findings. But when I met with him to discuss the results, I remember him saying, I quoted it because, yeah, you remember these things. No wonder it feels like your head's about to fall off. So these, I guess, results matched his expectation of what he was going to find, because when he did a physical examination before all of these testings, there was a lot of resistance or guarding with certain movements. So I believe these findings aligned with what he was expecting. And then we moved straight on to treatment. So he said that I was a good candidate for prolotherapy. And ran through at a high level what it was going to involve. And that led me, to booking it in. And so at that point in time, I knew that it was one injection, or like an injection procedure once a month for 3 months. So I'd have 3 injections, and they had to be 4 weeks between each injection. And he said to me that the point of this was that they would be injecting me with a substance, I believe it's sugar water. I'll put up the technical term. And it creates an inflammation response with all my ligaments, and encourages them to heal stronger, and hopefully that strengthens your ligaments. So unlike muscles, you can't just work out to strengthen ligaments. So prolotherapy is a really good idea for someone like me to try and get my neck more stable. All right, so jumping into the procedure itself. Now, I am not nearly pro enough to memorize this, so I'm just going to keep looking down and talking through what I got. So, as you saw on the part one snapshot, I received a very detailed letter after about exactly what they did. So, pre-procedure, you get a high level kind of summary, but this was like pages. Now, I'm no medical technical expert, so I did have to pop it into AI, and so this is what it spat out. So, spat back out. So the procedure itself, as we know, is for cervical instability, um, instability in the ligaments and the joints in my upper neck. So in this procedure, he treated both the pain nerves and supporting ligaments and joints in my neck. So it's a bit of a double whammy I found interesting. I thought it was just going to be focused on ligaments. So there are different parts to kind of what the procedure entailed. So part one, that was the nerve treatment, or he called it radio frequency. So they used CT guidance to find the nerves that carry pain signals in my upper neck. So this included the C2 dorsal root ganglion. That's a major pain nerve in the upper neck, apparently. The third occipital nerve and several smaller nerves from C3 to C6 they targeted. They then used pulsed radio frequency. So that's a low temperature electrical treatment designed to calm irritated nerves without destroying them. And boy, are my nerves irritated. So he said, think of it like turning down the volume on an overactive pain alarm system. So I looked into this after, and I guess it made sense to me because there's no point treating all the ligaments if my body is so used to this pain and so used to being in pain. It was kind of like to reset them. So help strengthen the ligaments, but also turn the pain down or like reset it. So part two, the actual prolotherapy style ligament injections. So the doctor injected a glucose solution, told you there's something to do with sugar before, into the ligaments that hold my neck together. So this included the supraspinous ligaments. I'll figure out how to say that later, and the interspinous ligaments. So both kinds, those ligaments run all along the back of the neck between the spinal bones. And the goal, as I mentioned before, for that was to create a healing response and really strengthen those ligaments and tighten them over time because mine are really floopy-doopy. So that's part one and part two. Now part three. Three? You can tell, brain not working. So part three was the facet joint injections. So he also injected around several facet joints from C2 to C2, C3, all the way down to C5, C6. So your facet joints are those small joints at the back of your spine that guide movement and provide stability. So these injections were placed into the back capsule of those joints. And again, the goal of all of this, of all of those three parts, is really to reduce pain, improve stability, and support healing around the joints. So it's amazing how in such a short time they're able to do the 1, 2, and 3, all of those things in one procedure. So that was kind of outlining what exactly happened. During those, I think it was like 20, 30 minutes. But I did forget to mention that pre the procedure, it said that I would be sedated. So me and my GP and literally everyone in my family thought that would just be, I would be awake and it would be like a light anesthetic. Like when you get your wisdom teeth out, some people get them in the chair and they're awake and they just sedated. That's what I thought this procedure was like. So I didn't actually know until I was in the room that I was going to be going under general. So they just kept using the word sedated. I'm like, that could mean two things. That could mean awake or asleep. Like it didn't say general anesthetic. Like it didn't say that anywhere. So because I am a people pleaser and don't like asking questions, didn't have any idea until I was in the room getting, buckled into the prone position that I was going to be asleep. And I knew when I woke up that it was a general anesthetic procedure. Again, hilarious. And I thought it was just me that felt silly not knowing. But when I spoke to my GP, she thought I was going to be awake too. So sedated generally means, I mean, it can mean either, but in my experience, when people say that they're awake and it's more anesthetic, it's not going under general. So that was a funny surprise for me. Bit of a funny thing. I had no idea that was going to happen. So I thought we could quickly cover the costs next. So Australia has really decent Medicare coverage, and I have top hospital and extras. So considering how much our monthly premiums are, we were still out of pocket quite a bit. Now I'll put on the screen now what health insurance paid, what Medicare covered, and then what I was out of pocket. Now it's not kind of one big lump cost. So you have to pay like the anaesthetist, the surgeon, the radiologist, hospital, all separately. But informed financial consent is really amazing here. So before I walked into that room, I knew exactly, well, like the worst case scenario, what it was going to cost. So I got a text from the anaesthetist saying what his fees were going to be, worst or best case. Now, this depends on your insurance coverage, on your Medicare, whether you hit the safety net. So I got a text from the anaesthetist knowing what that was going to cost. I got an email from my surgeon saying what his fee was going to be, and he participates in the known gap, meaning it was a $500 flat fee. And then I got an email as well from the radiologist saying what his best and worst case fee was going to be. Now with the hospital, the app's amazing. I could just jump on. I'm with Medibank and can check like what that was going to be. So that was going to be zero. I'm really lucky my work cover the hospital excess. So I just had 3 separate kind of out-of-pocket costs, which were all relatively low, and it ended up costing me this much for each procedure. So every single procedure, you get the same text and email from each of the health team on what the costs are going to be, and they were the same for all 3 procedures for me. All right, so what were the results? So speaking like immediately after the procedure, the first prolotherapy I got the first day was hell. It was so painful. Even just like bending to pick something up or grabbing and picking up something. I didn't realize how much we use our necks. We use our necks so much, or maybe we shouldn't be, but I am. And then the second day was really stiff and just a bit achy. And by the third day, I was able to do normal activities again. Still a little bit of a dull ache, like they said. But for me, it was just like day 1 and 2 were pretty bad, but 3 was all right. And just had a mild ache for a few days. Now, some other fun things that happened to me was I had heaps of left eye twitching, but like eyelid twitching. So it did not stop spasming for the first 72 hours for me. It was just like nonstop twitching. And then after that point, just a few times a day, which is still happening now. I didn't find this to happen as much with the second prolotherapy, like it just did mild eye twitching, but that's something I get anyway here or there. I've been used to my eye spasming or even temples twitching. So yeah, wasn't super unusual. I told the surgeon the second time and he said, man, maybe it was something sympathetic nervous system wise. My osteo seems to think that we were disrupting where we're getting the prolotherapy. That's where like the cranial nerves run through and back. So it made sense to her while that was happening. The only other thing was sleep was really tricky, or is really tricky. So I'm a side sleeper and I turn a lot. So every single time I turned, I woke myself up because it's really painful to turn, or like you're using your neck. I already sleep on a wedge and a pillow, this kind of cervical neck pillow that I have. So I felt a bit supported, but sleep still sucks in general. And another reason why sleep sucks right now, and the biggest gripe I have about this whole thing, is that you're not allowed to take any anti-inflammatories for the whole 3-month period. So no Nurofen, but my actual THC or CBD that I take for sleep is the reason I take it is for anti-inflammatory, but also to help me have a good sleep. And that oil is the reason why I actually have had the best sleeps of my life since I was a child. I've never had good sleeps, and since taking that has been amazing. So it's been 7 weeks now not being able to take it, and my sleeps are the worst. My HIV is just so that's been a bit annoying. But I will say the second time that I got prolotherapy, the recovery was so much better and easier. I didn't have that same day 1, 2, and 3 business because I had this amazing neck brace. Couldn't like believe what a difference it made. So it arrived the day I got prolotherapy. So it was so amazing that I didn't actually need any strong painkillers. Like it felt really like so much better having this neck brace on, recovering the second time around. So that leads me to my tips for anyone thinking about getting it, anyone interested or has got it coming up and coming in kind of a similar procedure to me. I kind of narrowed it down to the 3 S's. So these are my big tips or takeaways. Number 1, sitting. So standing really hurt more because you've got obviously gravity, the weight of your skull and head on your body, and on your neck. So this makes so much sense that the more I sat supported, the better I felt. So second time around with prolotherapy, I did a lot more sitting. The first time, like I went out and got food and like walked around, like did way too much walking. So of course I was in agony. So sitting down and not having all that weight on your neck really helped with the like less pain second time around. The second S2 was stabilized. So wear an amazing neck brace. So I used to wear, I've got it somewhere, this $20 one from Amazon. I've been wearing that for months, and no wonder I was still in a lot of pain and things like that because it wasn't a proper stabilizing supporting neck brace. This thing is worth its weight in gold. It's so amazing. So definitely invest in a good neck brace. If you want, like it just helped the recovery so much for me. And 3, sensory. So limit your sensory intake. I'm a big like TV computer person, and ever since all this stuff started happening, I can only tolerate an hour, like very little a day, before my brain starts hurting. But after prolotherapy, it was even less. Like the light, noise, sound, any kind of stimulus really like hurt my brain. So if you really limit that, I think that it really was an attributing reason why the second time around I'm getting prolotherapy, I wasn't as much pain and it seemed to be a lot easier. So I sat more, I stabilized, and I limited my sensory input. So that is my 3 tips. I thought I would just quickly jump back in to say that it's been a few days since I filmed that. Uh, and a symptom I wanted to add, in case anyone else is feeling this out there or has any tip suggestions, is extreme dizziness and nausea, especially in the morning. I've been having this for a while and I thought it was my POTS or like blood volume or something to do with that. But it turns out we tracked it back and it started a week after my first prolotherapy. Intense morning dizziness and nausea. It kind of gets better towards the end of the day. But then the second round of prolotherapy, I had the same symptoms, but nights are getting really bad. So as soon as I take this baby off and my neck is free, it's all wobbly dobbly. I get really dizzy. I feel really like, ooh. And my pupils, we've noticed, dilate huge. So we did a bit of an experiment last night. Took the neck brace off, felt woozy, wobbly, like really funny. Pupils went huge. Put it back on, and about 15, 20 minutes later, everything settled. So I'm thinking that it's not POTS. It's actually that symptom is to do with my neck instability. Apparently, neck instability can cause things like dizziness, nausea, and things like that. So the prolotherapy looks like might have intensified it or annoyed it. So that's been a fun thing to deal with.